Alright guys, in this short video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Zhou Dynasty. Along with the Zhou Dynasty, we're going to be looking at three Chinese philosophies. Alright, first things first, we're going to be, I want to talk to you guys about where the Zhou Dynasty is located and when they approximately came around. So, the Zhou Dynasty came around 1045 BCE after overthrowing the Shang Dynasty. So these guys came after the Shang Dynasty, the last dynasty that we've just covered. And unlike the Shang Dynasty, the Zhou Dynasty lasted about 800 years. Now, after they overthrew the Shang Dynasty, to justify their conquest or to justify why they took control or beat out the Shang Dynasty, they claimed that they had been given the mandate of heaven. And what the mandate of heaven was, in their mind, this meant that it was their right to become king or their right to rule because it was determined or the gods had chosen them to be the new king. If you look here on the right hand side, you see a map of approximately where the Zhou dynasty controlled parts of China. As you can see, kind of in the same area where the Shang dynasty controlled. Now, with the mandate of heaven, it was believed that if they were chosen king, they were believed to be the son of heaven. And with that title or with that responsibility came some perks and or some positives and some negatives. One of the positives, was that a person could stay a king only if things went well in their kingdom. Meaning, if you had good farming one year, you had no major natural disasters, people could then vote and say, yes, you're going to stay as our king. However, if they had a king that did not govern well, wasn't very well liked, didn't do what he was supposed to, or just had terrible luck, there happened to have been some natural disasters, then he could be overthrown, and then they would pick a new leader within that family. So it essentially had become a cycle instead of one king fits all type of mentality. At this point, they voted or overthrew and put a new one in place. Now, this new form of government ended up bringing and establishing feudalism. Now, under feudalism, the Zhou dynasty grew in power. And as we mentioned before, with kings, the kings controlled the land, and then they gave those loyal to him large pieces of land. As we talked about before, those are the nobles. However, they also call them lords. So, as you can see here, the nobles and lords were roughly the same thing, and each lord were rulers of their own land and had absolute power over the workers of this land. And as I mentioned before, eventually some of these lords became very greedy and ambitious, and in some cases some of them ended up gaining more power than the actual king. And because this happened, this ambition led to many lords fighting against each other for control of lands. Think of it like a civil war, but not the cool one where Captain America and Iron Man are fighting each other. In this case, you had people from different states or from different communities trying to control their territory and gain more of it. And this actually went for a very long time. For about 200 years, China was in a great turmoil, and this was actually known as the Warring States period. So there was a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction, and unfortunately a lot of death as well. Because of all this fighting, it led to three ways or three schools of thought or three Chinese philosophies. And during this period of war and chaos, it made people want to find more effective ways to obtain and to maintain royal power. They realized we got to do something better. Unfortunately, if we keep things up the way we're going, we're gonna just pretty much kill each other off. And the three schools of thought were Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. Now, we're going to be looking at each one of these individually. Now, under Confucianism, which is not to be confused with a religion, was founded or started by a man named Confucius. And the goal of Confucianism is to reach a just and peaceful society. Their goal is to be fair, and their goal is to be a peaceful one. They don't want to fight, they don't want to have wars. Now, it was believed under Confucianism that society worked better when people showed good behavior. If you showed good behavior, your society or your neighborhood or your community would benefit from it. One thing that they believed in was how everybody had a specific role to play in their families, and one of those was respecting one's elders was very important. Um, they also believed that as an elder, you had a great responsibility to set a good example. Uh, Sorry to sound corny here, but just like Uncle Ben told Spider Man, with great power comes great responsibility. This is where it kind of ties into Confucianism a little bit, in the fact that because you're in a position of power, it is your job to set a good example and use your gifts for the betterment of other people. Is another way to look at it. Another popular school of thought during this time period was Taoism, or we can call it Taoism, which is the same thing. And according to Taoists, nature is full of opposites. Some examples would be life and death, or light or dark. And they believe that humans must find and learn to find balance with nature, because our lives are full of opposites, and humans need to learn how to balance all those things out. They believe that true harmony comes from balancing the opposite forces of yin and yang. Down below, you see a symbol of the yin and yang, which most of us are familiar with. When it comes to Taoism, we have seen elements of this within Kung Fu Panda and many other Asian type of movies. Now, with Taoists, they believe that the goal of a human is not to be selfish, and they cannot work, or they should not work, to gain wealth and power. The objective is not to become filthy, stinking rich. Whereas today, most people would argue that that is the goal, is to become wealthy and become powerful. Now, they also believe that under Taoism, a person should learn how to adapt and roll with the punches and just simply go with the flow. Go with the flow. Don't adapt. Don't get caught up in life. Don't let life stress you out, and so forth. You guys use the term laid back, or sometimes you'll refer to someone who's who goes with the flow as chill, which is why I included a picture of the turtle from Finding Nemo. He's very laid back, kind of has a cool, mellow attitude towards things, and that's how Taoism is viewed. The last school of thought was also the most severe or the harshest, and it was very different from the first two that I mentioned. They believed that followers of legalism thought that humans by nature were selfish. They thought that all humans are selfish, and because they are selfish, a leader has to be strong and he has to be strict when it comes to passing out laws. Now, it's one of those things where they believe that if you did well, you were rewarded. However, if you broke laws, then you would be severely punished. It's one of those things where under Taoism, you were not allowed to speak bad against the government. If you did, you were executed, and in many cases, you were executed publicly to set an example. It was also one of those things where the kings believed in legalism, and because they believed in having absolute control, they had the army at their disposal, which they could then use against someone or a group of people if they thought they were causing trouble. Now, eventually, these schools of thought end up leading the Qin dynasty to slowly start working their way and overthrowing the Zhou dynasty. The Qin dynasty is the next dynasty that we will be covering next week. So make sure you answer the questions. If you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to email me. Talk to you guys later, and like always, make sure you like and subscribe. Deuces.